Hey, how's it going? This is David from the band Champ de Mars, a little indie rock band here in the nation's capital of Washington, D.C. I wanted to do a quick little video because over the years, as I've gotten a little older, been able to accumulate some more gear and accumulate some recording stuff, and then the natural progression was able to build a little recording studio in my basement. It's a small studio. I actually have a separate recording room though. Been gathering gear, gathering a pretty good mic selection. Have thought about turning it into a little boutique studio to kind of rent it out and help other bands. We're calling it Navigator Studios. But I wanted to do a video because I spend a lot of time on looking around YouTube, trying to pick people's brains and look for ways other people are doing things that aren't, Sunset Studios in LA, people on a budget, and learn from them. And so I thought maybe somehow this might be able to impart some stuff, but also kind of make it a conversation that as I look for the next place that I invest in, an extra $100 or a couple $100 here and there, what are some things that people who know a lot more about this stuff than I do would be able to, have a conversation and help me out a little bit. So give a little tour of the studio, and if you see things, have questions or comments, love to hear from people. Thanks so much. Well, here is the main practice recording space. I put the floor in myself. I painted it. This is down in the basement. Had to negotiate with the wife about how much space I had, but it's not bad. I forget the exact dimensions, but we can get a drummer in here. We can get another guitarist. The bassist, sometimes has to live in the closet. Just kidding. I have room for my growing pedal board and an amp, and it gets loud in here, and I like it that way. This is my main amp. This is the Mesa Nomad 55. I have had this amp for probably 20 years. I really like it. The distortion tones are just the type of tones I was looking for, something like in the mid-90s, kind of a Mudhoney, Peter Buck REM kind of tone. So the switches in there that go, especially on distortion 2 or distortion 3, vintage, normal, or modern or vintage, I kind of keep them in the normal setting. The clean channel, I've always tried to get as clean as possible. Which with this amp sometimes gets a little dirty. So I changed the tubes recently to EL34s, and that really kind of changed the tone. I wasn't quite expecting that, so I may go back to the 6s at some point. This is the current pedal board I have. I have a ton of pedals in the closet, different distortions. I don't know, I add pedals to the pedal board and they just seem to not get used. I mean, the flanger I barely ever use. So the octave pedal, I've had that since the mid-90s, and I wanted to get kind of a distortion tone or a solo tone that had an octave in it, like Neil Young. And I have no idea what octave he uses, but I kind of like it. So you'll notice a couple Donner pedals in there. That's something I've just discovered. I have the compressor and the dumbler there in front, and I also have the, I think it's called a Yellowtail reverb pedal back there. They were pretty dang good, and you can get them on Amazon for like $30. So it's not a bad deal. I would rather save the money for like some really cool expensive pedals, like the RE20 up there, which is I got that simply because Johnny Greenwood of Radiohead had it. I am still figuring it out. The phaser pedal I've had a long time. I don't use it too much. The freeze pedal is really cool when you're just starting a song. Use it sparingly. I'm finding that even though I have a hankering for buying a ton of pedals, I don't end up using them that much. This blue thing, I was looking for something to have a live ability to control the vocals a little bit more. I've always been very sensitive about my vocals, and I wanted something to give it a little bit more than just like the PA reverb. So I'm experimenting with it. I like it kind of so far. It's limited. I would like to incorporate some synth occasionally, and the harmonies are kind of hit and miss. So there's the pedal board. I also have the foot switch over here for the Mesa Nomad. What I really would like to do and you'll notice over there, out of focus, you'll notice over there is the other amp I recently bought about a year ago, Vox AC-15. Didn't get a 30, didn't think I needed a 30, especially for a room like this, and the gigs that we do, we're not doing stadiums, so do I really need a 30? No. But I really love that amp for the clean tones. As I said, the Mesa over there gets some kind of dirty clean tones. So what I'd like is just replace this with maybe just a simple A/B switch, and depending on the gig, go between the Mesa and the Vox. Simple little PA setup for my pretty crappy Behringer monitors. Use this little mixer to mix in the vocals. Channel 3 there is a hookup to my phone for Dropbox, and channel 4 I use for anything running out of inside in the studio to run out through the mains if we want to hear back something. Simple little 166 compressor, and I've found that has given the overall PA a lot more headroom. I don't know why. I'm not a great tech guy, but I have a lot less feedback now that I've started using the compressor. I'm not clipping that much, so it's just added some headroom. One more quick view of the studio. When we had a contractor come in, they did do the little window over there, which is kind of a neat touch. You'll notice along the walls, so I have added, some acoustic treatment up in the corners there. I have some bass traps. Then I have these things that you get on Amazon, acoustic treatment. I also even have some bedding that you can get at Walmart that I've spray painted just for cosmetically. This is obviously, and up on the ceiling, if you can see, I have just like packing quilts that you can get at Home Depot. This is obviously not going to help soundproof the room so that the kids can sleep better, but it does keep down the high-end frequency flutter. So I did it simply for recording. This isn't a room that when we record we get great acoustics or great reverb out of, so I try and get it as dry as possible. Drum set, yeah. Like I said, we're all trying to do what we can on a budget. This is not the drum set that we ever will record with. Sometimes we have practice here with it. Just makes it easier on the drummer to leave his gear at home. Pulse, actually the drums on the first EP was mostly these drums, except for the snare, and it was a great difference what tuning them up can do. I would love to upgrade to like a Catalina Maple. The snare I have replaced. It is a Superphonic. Now I don't play drums at all. I only got these drums because I wanted to learn more about recording drums. This may sound weird, but I sometimes mic up the drums just to practice recording. New things that I learned about, or new techniques, or just want to experiment with things. How can I get better attack on the kick drum? I'd never mic'd the front of the kick drum before, so I experimented that recently. I experimented with Glenn John's overhead technique recently. So sometimes I do that just for fun, and I needed a drum set to do that. Quick look at the guitars. This is mostly my pride and joy. I'd always wanted a Rickenbacker, so I got this one used for about $1,300 about 2 years ago. The next in line is a Fender Tornado, which is the main guitar I used in the band Bell Star many moons ago. Next to him is a Ibanez Roadstar, which I picked up in a pawn shop for about $100, and that is actually the guitar that we used for lead guitar on This Machine Kills Fascists. I also used it on the song 45 and the song Where Do All the Freaks Hang Out These Days on the last record. So $100 guitar. It has terrible wiring issues. I need to figure out the wiring issues, and I'm not good at that. Next to that is just a simple old Mexican Stratocaster that I got when I was 17 years old, and I've written a ton of songs on it. And next to that is just an Epiphone Sheridan that I also, it's funny that some guitars just elicit writing, and wrote the song Call Me and the song Aphrodisiac from the band Belle Star on that guitar right there. So here's a quick look at the mic collection I've been able to put up. Kind of on a budget. In no particular order, I'll start with the. I've been trying to experiment a little bit with ribbon mics, and so I picked up a couple of these Nady mics. Love to get a Royer someday, but that would be winning the lottery. Starting with the RSM-5, pretty happy with this mic. I've used it a lot as a pairing microphone and in guitar tones. I throw up a lot of mics sometimes on guitars, so this might be mic number 3 behind the cabinet or as a room mic. Recently on as a drum room mic, I've tried it a couple times, or on a Glenn Johns technique as the mic that sweeps towards the hi-hat. This RSM-5, my goodness, I read the reviews on it, $78. People say it sounds like a Royer 121. I don't know what a Royer 121 sounds like. I know they're supposed to be great, but I gotta tell you, for the bang for the buck, that thing is fantastic. It sounds like your guitar tone. So paired with a 57, which I don't know, I always think 57s are kind of cliche, but paired with a 57, you get a really great guitar tone sometimes. Next mic is a Studio Projects SP1, which I read several reviews of on Gear Sluts. Affordable mic, use it mostly, it's a condenser mic, use it mostly on like floor tom. So far haven't really found many other uses. It had sterling reviews. I just haven't tried it as much as some other things. AkG 414 is kind of like my best, most expensive mic. I use it mostly for vocals. For vocals, at least for my voice, I usually pair it with the Shure 7B. Obviously use it for recording drums and just about anything else. RE20, man, that's a great mic for kick drums. I've seen it in expensive studios, so that's why I picked it up. It's got a distinctive look. I noticed that Radiohead, Tom York uses it as a vocal mic sometimes. Dynamic, I love the kick drum sound out of it. Not having a D112, knowing what to compare it to, but it's a great all-around mic. These two Rode NTs, I have the NT1 and the NT1A. I know that one is supposed to be better than the others. Those were great starting out microphones. I used them as overheads a lot. Way back, it was just my one microphone that I used for vocals and everything else. These days, sounds a little bright and a little thin to me. And as you can probably tell, they have, I've done the thing where, I knocked over the stand on accident, stumbling around in the dark a couple times. So they've gotten bent up a little bit of noise on one. But fortunately, I've kind of moved on from those. Shure 7B, man, that's a great all-around microphone. Just a great all-around microphone. Dynamic, I use it for vocals. Bass, sometimes on toms. These two Audix D5s I have picked up as my go-to overhead mics now. Also guitars, acoustic guitars, just a great small diaphragm condenser. So the 57s, I've got a number of 57s that you don't see here. One of these is actually, I think, a Chinese imitation 57, the GLS Audio ES57. Tell a slight difference, but not a bad difference. And 57s are pretty cheap anyway. So the GLS is probably like $60. I can't remember, but if you're looking for a really inexpensive, great all-around mic, that's not bad. These two mics, the MXLs, I forget what they are, the 990 or the 991. They may come in a AOL discs used to come. I think everybody starts with these mics or something. They come as like a musician's friend starter kit. I use them from time to time. I mean, the small diaphragm condenser maybe I'll use on a hi-hat from time to time, but it's pretty bright. And speaking of which, I actually used this Nady ribbon as a hi-hat mic recently, and man, that tamed the high harshness of the hi-hats. So I may use this thing for a hi-hat mic, believe it or not. These are cheap condensers, good for podcasts. I don't see much use for them as much anymore, but maybe for a room mic or something kind of funny. And then the last is the Sennheiser 906, which I really like. It's great for live band practice. You can just drip it over a mic or an amp. The great design. It sounds a little mid-range sometimes, so sometimes if I'm using that for a recording, I'll probably pair it with a 57 or pair it. Oftentimes, I'll pair guitar tones with a 414 plus maybe the ribbon on the back of the mic. But that's what I've accumulated over the years. I think next on my to-do list, I would love a Neumann, just for no other reason than to say I have a Neumann, and I would love the TLM 102 or 103 probably. A Royer, and there's probably a ton of mics out there that I have on my Amazon shopping cart that I would love to experiment with. Talking about outboard gear. So, I have a lot of stuff that I gotta admit I don't use that often. When I'm tracking, even if it's a band or drums or, most of the time, to keep things simple, all I really use is preamps. I've got a ton of compressors that I've just picked up because maybe someone was giving them away, especially these the 166 or the DBX compressors. You can find those on the street sometimes. Maybe I'll use them as a limiter to just maybe tame some toms or something, or make sure I don't clip. But I really don't compress on the way in. So this Tone Beast has become my new go-to for vocals. I like the versatility of it. It's got a lot of headroom, so it's great for the ribbon mics and the Shure S7B. This Art TPS2 was probably the first preamp I picked up. It's decent. I did change the tubes on it. So it's got a little better tone for stuff that I just want to be transparent and not be colored, like overhead mics I'll use. The Aphex 207 I picked up used. It's got a lot of little problems. Sometimes phantom power works, sometimes it doesn't. That's the problem with used gear. I will use it as just an extra mic for kick drum. Sometimes, it depends. I find the dynamic part of it gives a lot of headroom. The phantom power is a little touchy. Other things I have is everybody's got to have a Lexicon MX200, right? So the reverb on that's pretty cool. I just recently tried to do an acoustic record where I tried, just for the fun of it, to mix everything out of the box, and so I ended up using that, and the reverb's fine. I just, I'm big on the Waves $29 sales, so I've got H-Verb now, and I don't know, it's tough to go back to analog. This thing, the Sonic 382 Maximizer, that's kind of an EQ. Apparently that was when I was just buying rack gear just so I could say I had rack gear. Have I ever really used it? Maybe not. Anyone want to buy it? Yeah, it's mostly for live use. Occasionally it might sound interesting. I've got this Behringer so I can use the optical ADAT to expand to 16 tracks. I've got an Art headphone preamp that is fine. So in compressors too, I was reading on Gear Sluts a lot of nice things about these RNC compressors. I gotta admit, I don't know if it's because I have slightly off power. So that both of them, one of them's 500 milliamps and the other's 600 milliamps. And my power cables are slightly off by 100 milliamps. So I don't know, and here's where I'm an idiot. Electricity is complicated. Is that the reason I just don't seem to get great tones? It's really hit and miss with these compressors. So I almost want to take them to the shop and see if because I bought them both used. Are they, just kind of defective, or what's going on? The Pod Line 6 I used to use a lot when I had to keep volume down. I haven't really found myself using it that much lately, and here again we have some extra leftover compressors. Like I said, use them great. I love these things for live, for when the band practices. It actually gives a little bit more headroom on the PA. Tracking, recording, mixing, not much use. I might try using the RNC for mixing on the stereo bus at some point. One last thing, I don't know if you can see it down there. One big investment. It's not very sexy, but you spend $100 getting a Furman power strip. It's helped greatly with the amount of cables I have spilling around everywhere. That's one of the things is you start building out a little bit of a rack unit. God, you get a lot of cables. This has helped. Just I can turn on the power and turn on 8 things at once. It's been really helpful. So I picked up 2 of those. I also picked up a DBX, patch bay, which took me a while to figure out. I'm still figuring out because I don't do a whole lot of outboard mixing. It's like, okay, top to bottom, like figuring out how that works. Maybe there'll be a separate video because it took me a little while to figure out the best way to make it work. And I use it occasionally. If I'm going to use the DBX, the Lexicon reverb or any compression or something, I'll use the patch bay. But with and I forgot to mention the Digio 2 rack, which is my main analog converter. I like it. I know there's a thing out of Chicago. I forget what it's called, Lion or something. That's an upgrade that you can send your O2 rack in, and they claim they can really make your O2 rack for $1,000 sound like it's 4 times what it's worth. Maybe, if I had an extra $1,000, there's a lot of things I would do with $1,000. But we'll see. I think that the biggest thing for me is, and we'll talk about the computer in a second, but in the 21st century, it seems like things get out of date within 2 years, and my computer is 6 years old. So I certainly need a new iMac. I need new Pro Tools, and when I do that, do I need to upgrade away from the O2 rack, and there'll be something better. So might as well hold off spending $1,000 upgrading this thing. Hey, which brings us to the computer. So I've got a 2011 iMac with a little mirrored monitor over here. Like I said, that's the problem with the 21st century. You spend $1,300 on an iMac, and 2 years later you take it to the Genius Bar and they're looking at you like saying, hey, this thing's so out of date. And so now it's 2019 and I've had this thing for 8 years. It's, I can't upgrade the OS anymore. So a lot of things are out of date. It still works for my needs. If I download Waves plugins, there's about 8 different workarounds I need to do in order to get the plugins to work. I know I need a new iMac. Like I said, that's another $1,400. And then when you do that, I'm still running Pro Tools 8. So I'll have to upgrade Pro Tools. So all these things get really expensive all of a sudden. And then while I'm doing that, might as well upgrade my digital audio converter. So we'll have to do that at some point. But everything was working fine for now. And real quick, I'll show you some of the plugins that I'm using. Gonna hold the camera steady. I've invested, like I said, I'm a sucker for the Waves $29 plugin. So I've gotten a lot of that stuff over the years. The Puig Tech, the REQ, the Schlepp 73, the very simple EQs that come with Pro Tools I use quite a bit. I have upgraded. I've got Isotope Alloy, Isotope Nectar, Isotope Ozone, still on Ozone 5. Like I said, you blink your eyes in the 21st century and you're behind 3 generations. Compressors, got the CLA2A, I've got RVox, Vocal Rider. The MJUC is a great free compressor that I use a lot. R compressor I use quite a bit. RVox I use on almost every vocal. Doubler. The delays that come with Pro Tools. Anything secret there? No. So I do have this Real ADT, which I like a lot. In some instances, I've got the Air plugins that come with Pro Tools. Anything fancy there? The Red 17, Red 37 I've picked up. Amplitude. Nothing secret there. Nothing secret there. Instruments. So Ableton, I'm trying to learn more. I use it a little bit. BFD Lite I don't use anymore. DB33 is a neat little organ I used to use. Don't use Mini Grand. I don't need anymore because I've got a piano. Vacuum is neat, and I've just started learning structure, and that's opened my world because yeah, it's just kind of opened my world a little bit. And then others, I've got the CLA. So the Chris Lord AkG stuff is, it's Chris Lord AkG. There's some stuff that may work for me. I actually use the guitar preset setting for clean guitars as a bus for all my guitars on a lot of things. The CLA drums, I just use the overheads. The problem with these, producer, I also have where is it? The JJP vocals. The problem with these all-in-one plugins is, it's just so much better, I think, to just, you have a snare, and what do you want to do? Okay, I want to do subtractive EQ on the snare, and then I want to compress it a little bit. It's just so easy with these all-in-one plugins to just go overboard and hit a preset and not understand what you're doing with, or why you're doing something to a signal. So it's okay, CLA drums, I'm hitting the snare, and it's he's got these funky names like Spunk and Slap and, Zool, and you don't understand what you're doing to, and why you're doing something. So I've actually found myself, even though I invest a lot of money in those all-in-one plugins, I don't use them that much anymore. It's I'd rather just stay simple. A little subtractive EQ, a little compression, a little, high-pass filter, and be done with it. And then, your time delay effects after that, and control everything and just keep it simple. On the topic of always needing money to upgrade, look, I've got these Behringer Truth monitors that are terrible. As I've learned more, I've learned that you don't want any kind of vaunting there, or whatever you call it. It's not very transparent on the bass frequency, so every time I do a mix, the first thing I check is to go play it in the car and have friends listen to it, because my bass is all squirrely durly. So I know I'd love to upgrade to some Yamaha white cones or some NS5s or something, but that's another thing that costs money. At least I have a cool lava lamp. Real quick, keyboard. So I have this Yamaha, God, I want to say it's a 45 something, but I forget what the model number is. But anyway, it's just a regular sensitivity-based weighted keys piano. It comes with organ, a little bit of strings. I wanted something that just felt like a piano. It's got a couple outs, so the big thing, this was like 400, 500 bucks. I really like it, for the limited amount of piano I do. Recording, I wanted something that I'd be able to record piano with that was beyond the silly MIDI patches that you get. And I've slowly learned that even though it has two outs in the back, those sound terrible. So I actually, when I record this, I record it like an actual stand-up piano. I just put two condenser mics over the sound base here, and it sounds a hell of a lot more natural than trying to do a jack out of it. So that's the piano you hear. This is what, a total piece of shit? A piece of shit part 2? I don't know. It's a Casio. The only reason I still have this around is because I've got a MIDI out, and so I invested in the Korg Volca FM. And a lot of these controllers that you find these days are USB. They don't actually have MIDI pins. So I need this to control the Korg FM. I just bought, and I think it's coming tomorrow, a Behringer version of kind of a controller. It's red, and I forget what the model number is on it, but it's got MIDI pins. So I might use that live, because I really love this little Volca FM. I'm trying to invest a little bit in some cheap synths. Controller, I've got the Oxygen 25. I gotta admit, here's where I'm dumb. What are these things doing? I know that you're supposed to patch these when you work with Logic or Ableton. I've never used them in my life. All I do, I love the fact that you set up your USB and you can play some simple keyboards on the MIDI patches that come with Pro Tools, and that's helpful. So this has its place. I would love to learn more about controllers, because I would love to learn more about synthesizers and controllers. Hey, so again, thanks so much for spending a few minutes looking at my studio. send on any questions or any, well, not complaints, maybe. Send me a complaint, but tips that you may have that you, as you see what I'm doing here, I would love to hear from you. So send them my way. Thanks so much for listening.